Welcome to MetroStar's Civvies Podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie Holman, and joining me today is some of our most special members here at MetroStar who are military veterans and are going to tell us about their own transition from military service to the civilian side. While you're watching today, be sure to leave comments in the feed. We'd love to hear what you'd like to know about support services that they relied on and recommendations that they would make for someone else transitioning today. Welcome to Civvies, where we bridge military experience and civilian triumph. I'm Stephanie Holman, this season's new host and a former Army Medical Service Corps reservist turned technical recruiter. Over the years, I've tackled a variety of terrains from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows. Join me as we gather stories and explore the intersection of military expertise and civilian opportunities, providing valuable insights for a seamless journey beyond the uniform. Welcome to Civvies, a podcast by MetroStar. So to get this started, I would love to just quickly go around the table and tell me who you are, what you do here at MetroStar, what branch that you served in, and for how long. Go ahead, Andy.
You're looking at me.
Looking at you.
I'm first. So I'm actually still a reservist in the Air Force, 12 years active, 12 years reserve. I retire August 4th, so countdown is on. So
congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. Integrated avionics technician, master sergeant. Been in since 2000, so right before 9/11. And here I'm a recruiter on our fabulous recruiting team.
Excellent. And how long have you been here?
It'll be a year, 2 weeks from now.
I'm Mike Oliger. I'm a program manager here on the defense side. I retired from the Marine Corps in 2018. I was a communications officer and acquisitions officer, and I've been here since 2018, so I've been here for 6 years.
Love that you're repping the Marine t-shirt.
Well, this is like my third choice. My wife didn't like my first two. At Ton Tavern once, she's like, nobody's going to know what Ton Tavern is. I was like, everybody knows what Ton Tavern is.
Absolutely.
I love it. All right, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Johnny Bowder. I'm a principal software engineer here at MetroStar. I've been here coming up on 16 years, actually, in a couple of days.
Wow.
Whoa.
He had a small break.
Not counting your broken time.
It doesn't
I went on a little walk about it.
That's right.
A little before that, spent some time in the Marine Corps, just 4 years as a combat engineer. Really nothing to do with what I do now. So, yeah, that's where I am now.
Thanks for being here, Johnny. Joe, over to you.
Joe Early, Senior Director of Solutions within our Innovation Lab team. Lieutenant Commander in the Navy Reserve, and I was a Naval Flight Officer. Spent 10 years flying, and after that, just pretty much program manager stuff. Staying nice, attached to the ground.
Love to hear it.
Yes.
And we save the best for last.
I'm glad you said that because I was going to say that if you didn't say it.
Oh, yeah. I knew where you were going.
Go Army, Army first.
We got to stay together.
Yeah.
Jermaine,
Army Air Corps.
tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yep. Jermaine Sutton. I am a business developer here at MetroStar. Been here for about 2 years. Retired January 22nd. After about 25 plus years in the military as a 25 Alpha Army's signal officer. I think that should cover it.
I think
for
so.
now.
For
Because
now.
we're gonna get into some heated stuff, some good stuff. But yeah, 25 plus years. After battalion command, culminating my career in the Pentagon for about a year before deciding to retire.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for being here. Definitely, there's no one way to transition from military service. So it never hurts to share, as many stories about what that looks like, right? Because different things work for different people. To start, I want to talk about like your general transition experience and just jump in wherever you feel, most comfortable. Some of the questions that I have today did come from some of our audience out there that are military right now and looking to transition. So I tried to pick questions that our audience wants to know, right? Really useful stuff. So first question for the group, What was the most challenging aspect of transitioning from military to civilian life?
My situation is unique in that my mental health is what drove me to retirement. You know, like I completed, I was in battalion command, getting ready to transition from battalion command to following assignment. And then I had PTSD issues.
Right.
That came about while I was in battalion command. And as a result, I made a hard decision. I was at the Pentagon, on assignment at the Pentagon, and I was working for a 2-star general within the headquarters DAG-6. And as I was the first few months in that assignment, I told the boss, "Hey, sir, I'm done. I have nothing left." So immediately dropped my retirement paperwork at that time.
Okay.
And at that point, the most difficult thing for me was figuring out what the world was I going to do after I left the military. Now, I came in the Army when I was 18 years of age. I was enlisted, then went green to gold and became an officer and did that for 22 years, total years, enlisted in officer time, 25 plus years, almost 26 years. And so it was a new normal for me because the Army told me where I was going. They told me what assignments I was going to take. They advised me on exactly the jobs I needed to take to be competitive, to continue to move up the ladder. And so now here I am, leaving the Army as a Army leader, supporting comms for the Army, but not really specialized in as a technician or anything like that. I see myself as an IT manager, but now how does that translate into the civilian sector? So it was more of the mental aspect of, transitioning out of the military. How do I take this one persona of being a soldier, leader, to now just being Jermaine Sutton?
Right.
And so the difficult thing for me was the mental aspect of it, changing the mindset from operating in your entire adult life to now just being this guy right here who is awesome, and trying to figure out where's my place and purpose in the civilian sector.
Right.
And so I paused there, for the group to see, to hear what thoughts you guys have. But that was my main thing, was the mental transition, because a lot of people take that for granted. They think that, you get out, you're used to adapting and overcoming. But now the civilian side of the world is totally different from the military side of it. And there's some nuances associated with it that you don't really think about as you're transitioning, that now all of a sudden you have to put a lot of attention and focus on.
Jermaine, I got to go back on this with you a little bit.
Yeah.
So it sounded like when you were ready to leave service, you knew this was your time to exit. So in making that choice, and I have this question for the entire group and those that went from active to reserve service as well. When you sign that paperwork or hit enter on the keyboard, did you have a huge sense of relief, or did boom, anxiety go straight up because now you're closing that chapter just in that act of, writing signing your name to that this is what you want to do?
It was a little bit of both, because at that point my body had pretty much made the decision for me. My mental health made the decision for me. And then, once I signed my retirement paper and got my approval, at that point it was, oh man. And then it was like, oh. And then all of a sudden, overdrive of stressors.
Right.
Because to Mike's point, when you're serving, I started deploying as a lieutenant, and that didn't end until I was a senior major. And so all of the medical stuff, taking care of yourself, going to medical appointments, and my jacket was thin as far as the number of times I went to, the doctor or to see somebody about an ailment. So all of a sudden I'm being told, from guys that I know that are retired, dude, you got to go to your doctor appointments. You got to get them to do a full-on checkup on you.
Right.
You got to go, anything that you have been dealing with, you need to go get that checked out and get it documented. And I think, and the benefit of being in the DC area, and all of a sudden I'm going to doctors, getting referrals, and I got access to a lot of resources, and that that I leveraged, and I felt bad because I still was in the fight. I still had my Pentagon requirements as far as the mission, supporting the G6 headquarters, DAG6, but. Someone told me, Jimmy, you got to take care of yourself. And I had the team, team of leaders that gave me that opportunity to do so.
But beyond like just the VA benefits, like I remember in 2011, right after a deployment, my last active duty deployment, deployed more in the reserves than I did active duty. I signed that paperwork and it was instant relief. Like I made the right choice. I know, and I've never thought I made the wrong choice. And I got out of 11 years. So if you know anything about military retirement, some people call that very dumb. But for me, the ops tempo from August 2000 until July 2011 was just ridiculous. So, it was sense of relief. And then almost instantaneously, you realize, the medical benefits, like what am I going to do there? I joined the reserve, so Tri-Care Reserve Select's amazing. But you don't have the camaraderie. You don't have, your squadron, your platoon, whatever, around you. You don't have your people around you. There's a sense of relief that's been your life for 12 years, and then all of a sudden it's gone. And when I stepped out of active duty, my first choice was to start my own business. So I was completely alone. And so there's a sense of relief, but then also a sense of, oh, what did I just do?
Right.
Was this the right choice? And you just got to stick it out. Like it's the resiliency we learn in the military. No matter what branch you're in, resiliency is everything. And you just, you stick with it. You stick with your decision. You make it work. And everybody has their own journey and different experience. But,
Talk to me about the pressure. You were single at this time, or were you married and you had kids and people
married,
that rely on you?
Yeah, married, 3 kids at the time.
Okay.
Yeah, married, 3 kids at the time. One of them was less than a year old. So yeah, it was not just a decision that affected me. It was a huge decision, but I made it for them though. I mean, you said your mental health, your body was done. What was important to me was done, and for me in my situation, I made the choice, to get out at that time. And luckily I had the reserves. The reserves have been amazing. Had just as long of a career in the reserves that I did active duty. Still allowed me the opportunity to stay connected and to have that, camaraderie and deployments, I love deployments. Yeah. Although if they told me I was going tomorrow, I'd be really
Air Force deployments.
Yeah.
Let's be right.
Camp Cupcake,
Bagram Air Force Base living.
I never stayed in a tent. It was always
We did.
But yeah, so it doesn't just affect you. Even if you're single, it doesn't just affect you.
Right.
But they have buffer. There's buffer programs now, though. SkillBridge. I was able to take advantage of SkillBridge on the first time I quit, and that was really important because it helped you build the network. It helped you overcome some of those shortfalls or that lack of kind of commercial understanding, industry understanding of who you are and what you do. And how are you going to understand the taxes and understand the life changes in the healthcare? That some of those programs actually help reduce that responsibility overhead during your transition, so you can more closely own the transition from family to finances and take care of that. So SkillBridge is one of those programs that I was able to take advantage of that really helps buffer that. It's definitely not the solution, because who knows if you're going to get hired by that company, but it's one of those opportunities that's like an internship that does help reduce that burden. That was really valuable. So that's why I love that MetroStar got it. SkillBridge is because, one, it's definitely who you hire. That makes you a great company. But 2, it's how do we help continue to support, those folks like us who really need that help, need mentors, need folks who understand that journey.
And I've hosted many SkillBridge, folks coming out, being on the civilian side. And even if you don't hire them, like even if you aren't in a situation to hire them, it's just a tremendous opportunity for them to just kind of have that transition period, have that like added to the resume, have that life experience of not wearing the uniform, not
It's your first thing on your resume besides military.
Right.
That helps.
Yeah. So,
What was everyone's like pre-transition timeline?
So your original question around transition and what I was prepared for, all those things. So again, I was in the Marines as a combat engineer. We did explosives, construction, nothing, IT related. Mm-hmm. When I was getting out, I did, apply to some schools, and I registered to go to school for computers. And I did that, thought I went according to plan, but about a year into college, I went to a job fair and I talked to probably 20 companies, and I talked to all the big ones, all the ones that I recognized. And they all basically blew me off because I had no experience on the paper. But on my way out, I saw that, one more MetroStar's next to the door. And I went and talked to them. Yeah. And really, they were the only ones, to them, they basically, I think it was between me having Marine Corps experience, because they were looking for people to work on some Marine Corps work, between maybe they liked me a little bit, and the fact that I was going to school for computer science. But that was it. I had no experience. And so, they took a chance on that. So that was probably the biggest issue for me is, just so many companies want real experience. And so where do you start? And that brings in the question of SkillBridge, right? I have limited exposure to SkillBridge at this point, but I could tell you that if they had SkillBridge when I was getting out, I definitely would have been trying for that, because it's just like the same thing I tell a lot of college interns or college students looking at internships. Getting real world experience, regardless of who you are, is huge. Because whether it's working in the military or outside of the military, going into the industry is completely different than like academics or military, right?
Completely different.
That was really my probably most difficult thing. I just kind of got lucky. So definitely take advantage of things like SkillBridge. And then just I think to your question of schedule. So I was prepared. Like I knew I was getting out. My plan all along was 4 years. So as I was getting up to it, I was already doing college work. It was just general college work, but I was doing some schooling. I already had a job lined up. I did an interview to work for TSA, literally in California, that I was going to be working here. So I had a plan. I was getting out. I was going to go to school. I was not married, but I was with my wife. She wasn't my wife at the time, but I was with her. So I was going to be moving in with her. So I was going to have a bill to pay. And so my plan was in order for sure. Makes a difference.
Absolutely.
But that's the military for you, planning ahead.
But I like that point that he made about, your marketability once you leave the military. I ran, to the similar things as I transitioned out. It's like, 25 plus years signal officer, 05. But now you're putting your resume out there and you're going to these interviews and you're not getting picked up. And it's like, well, what is going on here? Because they, as you're getting ready to get out, they're saying, well, you're going to be just fine. Because of your years of service, you're going to be just fine. That's fancy.
You want people lined up at your door.
That is not.
That's the biggest misconception. That's a huge misconception.
Big misconception because that did not happen, And so, that was one of the struggles. She said, all of a sudden, you have a job and now you're fighting to get a job. And I was like, man. So I had literally take 4 months off. After I took my first, contracting job, I take 4 months off to figure out exactly what I wanted to be when I grew up. That was a challenge.
How did you deal with that, emotionally? You did pretty well in the military, right? You reached a pretty high rank. You probably thought you'd have an easier, transition, and then you're not getting picked up, maybe rejection email after rejection emails coming in, and you're only human like the rest of us, right? And that doesn't feel good.
It's a shot to the ego, to be honest with you. That's why I made a comment about as you're transitioning, work on the mental side of that transition, and because you're going to run against disappointment after disappointment as you're engaging with companies, and then of course a lot of these companies have hiring cycles. So when you don't know that, you go to the website, you apply for a job, not knowing that company's hiring cycle doesn't have for another 6 months. And so you're thinking that, man, it's been 3 months and I haven't heard anything from the company. I submitted this application a while back. And so that's when I discovered the importance of the network. The people that because I didn't know nothing about LinkedIn as I was transitioning out. It's like, hey, get a LinkedIn account, some mentors, and people that are already, retired, get a LinkedIn account, start building a network. And that was valuable, very valuable. That's how I connected to MetroStar, through LinkedIn, reaching out to Ali and say, hey, would like to, meet and talk about potential opportunities, working with your company. But yeah, it was definitely a reality check.
And on the innovation side, these algorithms that search your resumes don't make it any easier because you don't even get in the door.
You're right. Well,
so taking that time to match your resume to that language, where you don't know what language to call the skill that you have, even that's part of the transition.
Yeah. You have a military member that has talked a certain way and written EPRs and OPRs and whatever performance reviews, for 20 years in a certain way. Like there is a different language, and you're entering a job market that you're hoping that the recruiter and the hiring team can understand your career. Right. And so, I was gonna say earlier, like when you transition, there's just as much unlearning than there is learning.
Absolutely.
You have to unlearn so much of how to talk, how to present yourself, how to carry yourself in a conversation, when you can speak up and when you shouldn't. It's just completely different, and so that's why TAPS programs and stuff like that are so good. But you're going to hit some bumps on the way and you're going to make mistakes. And in interviews, they're going to, want you to talk about you, but you don't want to, because you want to talk about the people that made you, because that's what you are in the military. So.
I think you bring up a good point there about TAPS, because I did TAPS and the retirement class, and just because timing didn't work out well. But I think like what they teach you there, and SkillBridge also wasn't really a thing when I retired. I mean, that was only 6 years ago, but it's not like it is now where it's just massive and everybody's trying to get a SkillBridge. Yeah. But I think like there was some organizations that like Hire Heroes, they did these internships. I know we've had a couple here at MetroStar, a few years ago, and they're really like one of the ones who really helped me the most, because even with the retirement class and TAPS, there's like, well, here's how to write a resume, do some mock interviews, here's how to fill out an application. And I'm just like, I know all this stuff. Right. What I need to know is, how do I transition? And they're like, well, come to our job fair. And unlike you, I mean, I went to a job fair. It was like, hey, this one's for digging ditches. This one's for, if you want to be a lifeguard at the pool. I'm like, this isn't what I'm looking for. Right. And I think that even those are great resources for people who are exiting the military. They're not all encompassing, and you still have to go out and learn so much on your own that they just give you the tools to do it. I remember we had I think 3 days the Department of Labor came down and was like, hey, everybody needs to write a resume. We're going to look at your resume. We're going to tell you if it's good or not. And if they would basically highlight anything in there that didn't translate from military to civilian very well, like figure that one out. You can't do that. Right.
I got
what am I supposed to do? I'm a rifleman, what I mean?
Yeah. So the question for the group, what resources then or support did you find valuable that made a difference when you think back to your transition? You just mentioned TAPS, Hire Heroes.
What else? This is a shameless plug for Hire Heroes, because they built my resume for me. Like I didn't have to go through resume service. They built my LinkedIn for me. They're like, give us access to your LinkedIn. We'll make it look like it would for anybody who wants to hire you. So it's not very military oriented. Right. The good thing is, like, I don't know if, I'm sure they have this on our side, but they have Marine for Life. They're like, as soon as you get on LinkedIn, join Marine for Life, because there's this network that you automatically have. And so they encourage us to do that. So every once in a while I'll go on there and look for people who are looking for positions, especially if we have open ones that I'm looking to hire for. But I think like Hire Heroes was the one that I went to. I think Military One Source is pretty good. They've matured a lot over the years. For me, unfortunately, I didn't think the Career Center was what, they weren't helpful to me. Right. But I know they're helpful to plenty of people. They just were not helpful to me. It wasn't what I was looking for. Coming from an agency, more so from the fleet or from, an operational command, leaving a systems command. I mean, I built an acquisitions background. So where the majority of the people there are contractors and civilian, federal civilians. So I think for me, that kind of made my transition a little bit easier because I was working with government civilians and contractors already. I knew how to work with them and not from the top down, because there's folks who are like, well, hey, I'm the project officer or whatever, you do what I want you to do. And, whatever, it's not the way to do it. But I think getting in that environment was extremely helpful to me because it really made my transition. And like you said, how lucky you were, I was very, very lucky. I applied to one job.
With using that resource?
From coming from Systems Command.
Yeah.
And part of that was, we all come with a Rolodex, right? So it's like you saying, hey, we have some Marine Corps work. Mine was like, hey, you're coming from Marine Corps Systems Command, the only acquisition command in the Marine Corps. You can help us get in the door.
From a resources perspective, I think there's a couple different ways, especially from the technical side, but from the program manager side, I reached out to everybody who knew somebody in industry. That industry hosts a ton, at least I'd say there's more than a handful of just transition boot camps. Deloitte has one. I think AWS at least used to have one. SkillBridge, right, is a program that they use that other companies used to fund for these things. So that's one piece from the business standpoint, but from the technical standpoint, it's use the open source network, write your code, contribute back to different projects and see what you love to contribute to and see what your language is based on what that skill set, what your complementary skill sets are. And that's where I go to look as folks are transitioning from the military and I want them to join my team. Steph will send me over a resume and I can see the language is man, this person's transitioning out. But then you go to, from a hiring manager perspective, I look at the other complementary things that they've done. If the language doesn't match, which I know it might not for the role, how can I give this resume a chance, right? So what are those certificates? What are these things that you've done? Is your GitHub on there so we can actually go look at things that projects that you've contributed to so that we can look at your backlog. Your Rolodex, right, isn't just your network anymore. Right. Your Rolodex is also the code that you've built, the projects that you've contributed to. So in today's technically astute ecosystem, that's something that I think is extremely valuable for new hires and for potential resumes. It's not even just about who you know anymore or even what's on your resume and the language. It's what's that technical backlog that you've been able to take advantage of in your transition time is your portfolio. That matters and that helps a lot, especially since we work in the open source a lot.
The crazy thing about it as I was, because my situation was unique. I had a short window, maybe 6 months, to get, to be in the transition process. And I'm working in the Pentagon and we're going through a transition. So it's like, Jermaine, and I would love to help you out on SkillBridge, but we just don't have the people to allow you to do so. Right. But they did allow me to take care of my medical stuff. And then once I started terminal leave, I did TAP. But TAP for me was more so checking the block. I did not have the time to focus on
because they won't let you retire until you get that. You get that
baseline. It's level setting everybody's knowledge about a transition, but it's baseline.
Now in the virtual world, TAP I think has gotten worse. TAP is better in person. I've taken it in person and virtual. It really is. Now you can it's a check in the box.
Yeah, I'll check it.
My first TAP instructor in person was actually really good, like a retired police sergeant or chief or whatever, and somebody who was invested in the transitioning military member. And he was, presence. He's somebody who just embodies presence and care. That's an in-person feeling. So TAPs can be valuable. It's really dependent.
Yeah, I did get a lot of value out of vets to industry. vest industry.
Yep.
Yeah. They would bring companies in and give some inside nuggets about, some of the things that you need to be looking at. I literally watched my resume go from a military resume after the 10th iteration to one that started saying actionable value contributed to these jobs that you had, and writing it in a way where it says, okay, I was, tank commander overseeing all of Southern Europe. Now I got to go in there and say supported 40,000 users, value.
That translation is massive.
Right.
And that's back to your point too, like translating it from what you understand into something that everybody can understand. And as an IT guy, it's like, okay, now I can align this to certain companies, and then I start getting interviews. But then it goes back to the experience. Not so much the military. Yeah, we know military, we thank you for your service, but experience in private sector. And that's what I didn't have. And so now, and so when I got to MetroStar, I originally came in looking at, PM role. I PMP, did my certification for PMP, but I say that's something I just don't want to do. And so I say, based on my military experience and being a signal guy and trying to sell IT to the warfighters, I have more value, as a business developer. And that's how I got my foot in the door. You take a step back, you learn, you take, pay cut, whatever you have to do just to get in the door, and then work your way back, work your way up. And that's what I did.
One thing is, especially humbling yourself.
Absolutely.
Fall in love with the opportunity, not the role you're given.
Right.
Because you can take full advantage of the opportunity, like blossom where you planted, whatever, people have told you before. But where you start isn't necessarily where you're going to end up, because you have to shape that, right? That's part of you shaping your path. And you take a swing of the bat, right? And you don't know whether it's going to be a double or a triple. You're going to run as fast as you can until somebody cuts it off, right? And so take the bases you can, and then figure it out from there. And that's exactly what I take from, when you talk about the transferable skill set of adapting, being able to adapt to any environment. This was definitely adaptation, because it's new space, but it's not like I haven't been here before, in uniform. So, being able to say, okay, man, this is what we got. This is what the situation is. It's what we need to do to get ourselves aligned to where we're trying to go. And in that 4 months of just sitting, in an apartment, man, just, 4 walls and no one's calling you and you're not important, no op tempo. And it really, just sitting in front of the screen, man, I'm looking at LinkedIn, I'm connected to my network, and I'm talking to various folks. And I was taking in information.
Yeah. That can mess with your mental health right there. That transition is like going from that to this, scrolling and clicking.
I think for me, I was at that point, man, mentally, man, where I was already beat down. So, being able to just not do anything actually was God sent, man.
Probably a good reset.
It was a good reset.
How did you all know what you did want to do after separating from service and what you did not want to do on the civilian side? What did that look like for each of you?
Principles. Kind of have a principled approach. You're not going to take something that's just completely random and completely out of your zone of expertise, because you do have to make a living.
Yeah.
Right. So there is acceptance of risk, but there's also understanding of you don't even. That belief in yourself to know that if you can actually invest in yourself and invest in the right path and committing to the right network and the right people in order to kind of pull that rope a little closer to you for where you would like to be, then that's kind of manifestation of you leading in that direction. It's not, I'm not going to do a job I love right away. Right. But I can do something that's acceptable that lets me take the next right step. And that is the hard part in getting that foot in the door. Like, just get there. Like Johnny, he just got the internship. And then it's like, okay, do I really want to commit myself to this? I've got the opportunity to invest in myself and invest in the time to upskill and learn it and love it. Right. Or at least learn it and know it. And then I can actually I'm still making an income. I'm still supporting my family. Now, what do I do next? Right. So get to that next milestone of yes, and then we'll figure it out from there. But really just having those principles.
And that's learned in the military.
Yeah.
Because we got, not all of us, but a lot of us joined when we were like 17, 18. Like we did not know life. Like I was 17. My parents had to literally sign me into the Air Force.
Same here.
Yeah.
Like basically emancipate me so I can make my own decision. So
I was a grown man.
you're not grown yet.
I was 17. I was getting to go. I know.
But since that age, that young age, or wherever you were when you joined,
I don't know what that means.
Sounds like an insult.
I think I'm the grand old man of this table, but
We're
okay.
protect you. Too small. A Marine.
but we've been checking boxes and working on, that strategic career growth our entire career. Because in the military, you get promoted by doing certain things and checking things off and reaching that next milestone. And so that's a learned experience that, shameless plug for anybody hiring. Veterans know how to do that. They're very driven people. We are very driven people.
So I have to ask you this question because obviously you're in recruiting. Most that have interacted with you on social media or other platforms, they also know you're a military veteran. So, I would guess that there are times when military veterans military members getting ready to transition reach out to you with their resume and say, "Hey, Andy, tell me what I should do next." Right? So walk me through that. What do you respond with?
I try to respond to everybody, but yeah, just the combination of my position and how long I've been in this industry and my military career, that combination, it does make me a common target for that, which is great. I welcome it. When I have the opportunity to respond, I talk about a lot about what we talked about earlier, which is like talking as many conversations as you can have to people that have done it, that are further along in their transition than you, have done their transition or are in it now. Talk to them, unlearning as much as you're absorbing this new information. Figure out what you need to shed from your brain. Like our brains we have a capacity and we've got to, we got to unload stuff to download more stuff, and there's a lot of stuff that you have to unlearn. And then network. You have to, if you're going to, especially if you're going to step into the industry or professional career, like as much as we don't want to say it, it's about who you know. Yeah. Like it is, it's not all about who you know, but that's a huge part of it. It's like, how many conversations have you had with people that can influence your career, that can lead you to, hey, I can't help you, but this person can, and that kind of domino effect of networking. It's not instantaneous, but it is an investment that, will pay dividends.
How many people got here because of their network? Got hired at MetroStar because of their network?
Yeah.
As a recruiter, not a recruiter. Definitely says I'm a Marine on my LinkedIn. But I get no questions or messages from people getting out of the military saying, "Hey, what do I need to do?" So, again, it's all about the network, right? Like, who you don't know. I was just going to say that, to you or any other recruiter, feel free to send somebody my way that has questions. Like I'm always available to mentor anybody or,
same here.
Anybody with a good enough reason.
Any
veteran, throw my way, but yeah, I think people like just somebody needs somebody to ask questions. What do I do next? How do I prepare?
We could drop it.
I've got lots of ideas.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I wanted to dissect networking. Like, what does that specifically mean to you? Because we hear that thrown around here, there, everywhere. Does it mean calling someone, connecting with them on LinkedIn, emailing them, going to a career fair? What does networking mean to you? Let's just go around the table. All of the above?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, well, I've talked a lot about it. I don't have to be the only one, but it is putting yourself out there in uncomfortable situations, maybe uncomfortable situations, that you don't know if that conversation or that interaction is going to lead anywhere. You just take a shot in the dark. I still, matter of fact, a month ago, I'm in kind of a relatively new area of my career with pre-award staffing, and it's a part of recruiting I've never really directly touched. I reached out to somebody that I've know in my network that is a director of pre-award staffing at a much larger company, and I said, "Hey, I am pretty clueless. Can we just meet once a month?" Mm-hmm. And that's networking. And I'm not trying to get a job, but it's networking. So, regardless of what your end goal is, it is just putting yourself in uncomfortable situations, raising your hand, saying, "Hey, can we talk? You don't have to be my mentor. Maybe you will, but can we just talk once a month? Because you're way further down your journey than I am. And I need help because this is new and you're good at what you do, obviously." So yeah, just uncomfortable situations and raising your hand.
Yeah, I would think, I wouldn't say anything I've done was like really traditional networking. I kind of do it from the top down. So what I've done is I've gone and I've found people that I know that are getting ready to transition out. I'm like, what are you doing? How are you doing this? Like, what are your plans? Mm-hmm. In the attempts that at some point there may be someone I want to try to bring here. So I'll reach out and say, "Hey, I know you're retiring in a year. What is your path to get there? Have you done your retirement class? Have you talked to the VA? You done all that stuff?" But then, and it's interesting because I look at my son kind of went through this when he graduated from college, having, to your point before about, no skills at all. Mm-hmm. I put a plug out there to my network for him that ended up getting something like 6,000 views. Wow. Because it was my network and then my network's network and my network's network. And so all these people are looking at him and he had applied, he applied for some internships here. He unfortunately didn't get here, but he ended up landing a job mostly because of my network that I put him in. I've like I said, I've kind of just done it from the top down, reach out to folks who I know are coming out and saying, how do you plan on getting to where you're going to go? Because let me tell you what it is, knowing what your background is. And like I said, I was very lucky coming from where I came from that I didn't have to do that much. But there's some people who have to like really rebuild themselves and, trying to help them get on that path so they continue to be successful. And I think, it goes both ways.
Yeah.
I would definitely say that as in today's world, like LinkedIn is the place. So anything you can do to establish your LinkedIn profile, fill it out, like be very thoughtful about what you know, what you want people to know. To Joe's point, getting involved in projects. So, I'm very technical, maybe not everybody is, but actually contributing to a project, listing that on your LinkedIn, right? Creating a profile on GitHub, linking that to your LinkedIn. So really building out like establishing your brand, I think is for the first thing. And then a couple of things like you mentioned being uncomfortable or something like that.
No.
I really liked your idea. So you went straight to Ali, the CEO.
Yeah, I went to Ali.
Don't be afraid to do that.
No, I went straight to Ali.
You're coming out of the military. You get you're going to get a little more respect than most people.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to message you. Say, hey, looking to do this. This is what I know. Would love to have lunch with you, or if not, who can I talk to? And then the last thing was kind of in the general area was. Again, technical might not be for everybody, but meetups are not quite as big a thing anymore. Right. But go to any sort of get involved in local organizations, whether it's remote or not. Just try to get to know people, make yourself uncomfortable, go out and talk to people in person. So.
But that's the key thing that you're hearing that you said as well as you said about being uncomfortable, learning to be uncomfortable, because you're talking about. Being in a role in the military where you're a leader, you walk into a room, people stand up and things like that, protocols type stuff, and it does carry some weight when you even though you're not saying, hey, I'm deliberately gonna walk into this room so I can get the notoriety of being top dog. Then all of a sudden you find yourself transitioning out of that culture and that environment to now doing something you haven't done a lot of, putting yourself first. Everything's focused on taking care of soldiers and leading soldiers, and you're the last thing you don't think about yourself. Now you're being asked, so what about you? I was like, holy crap, what is that? and the network is your network is your crutch. That's the way I took it, because I did not know what I did not know, and all of a sudden I'm building these relationships with people, and I'm having to say, hey, can you help me out? For the first time, can you help me out? Because I'm trying to get here. This is what I'm thinking about, some of the things I want to do, but I don't have an entry point. I need your help. And for the first time, you're seriously vulnerable.
How hard was that for you to say just that? I need your help.
Oh, extremely hard. That's why, I took the time that I was off. That's all I was doing, connecting with people, going to vets the industry, event after event, going to Amazon's, recruiting event, putting your resume out there, not getting a lot of, hits, and you're getting frustrated. And, and I would add to anyone going through the process, you got to be resilient. And you're looking at some of the guys, military personnel transitioning out, and they're having those same issues, y'all. I'm looking for a job, doing such and such. And I still haven't gotten any hits. I gotten potentials, where someone reached out, but nothing that ended up in the offer. Right. Some are more luckier than others, but that network and connecting you to certain organizations, getting you at least in front of, because I got a Microsoft interview. Interview went well, but of course you lose out to someone that has more experience than you, even though you're a senior military guy, and that stuff, it stings. And the only thing you can do is get up the next day, dust yourself off,
just keep
it moving. And then eventually, like I said, I got to the point where I was reaching out to every CEO in government contracting and introducing myself. By that time, my resume made sense.
Right.
And I was introducing myself, told them what I thought I brought to the table. And Ollie was the one that said, hey, let's get on the call.
One thing that you touched on, Mike, is that with your mentor, it sounded like you talked through some salary kind of expectations or targets. How did you all figure that out, right? What salary to target post-military?
We're not going to ask for how much money.
So I'll say, so for, and I don't know if the Army or the Navy Air Force has this, but on Marine Online, not Marine Online, what was the other one? No, it was Marine Online, MOL. So there's a tab on there that talks about your direct pay and your indirect pay. And what a lot of people don't understand is their indirect pay. So that's your housing allowance. That's your COLA. That's all that stuff. So, but then there's so it's your healthcare. It's all these things that you don't get monetarily when you get paid every month. So when basically what he said is like, take a look at your indirect pay and your direct pay, add those up, because even though I may be only getting, I think as a major, I was getting maybe $84,000 a year. And then you throw in all the other things, then you throw in your insurance and all that stuff. And it says, well, your paycheck is $140,000 a year. And I'm like, well, that's not what I'm getting paid. So where is it all going? And it's to that healthcare and insurance. I mean, you're talking life insurance. I mean, you're at $400,000 SGLI. I mean, you don't get that when you come out. Right. So when you look at all that stuff, and you take that, he's like, now take that, that's your bottom line. Now add 20%. That should be your base asking fee or your base asking salary is what, that's what he told me. Everybody's going to be different and everybody's going to, look at because some people, have a whole lot more self-worth, think, well, hey, I'm a battalion commander. I should be making $200,000. But which is not true. But then, my wife, who's been in industry for a long time, as a contractor, she's like, well, hey, you've never done an interview, so how are you going to do an interview? I was like, well, I don't know. And she's like, well, how are you going to ask for a salary? I'm like, I have no idea. She's like, well, go to Google and you'll see this thing. It says like, hey, when you're doing your first interview and they ask about salary, here's some typical questions. And one that'll always stick in my mind. And I remember my recruiter when I came here and she asked me what I wanted to make. It's a great icebreaker. It kind of lowers the tension because it's always very tense when you do that. It's like, when they ask you your salary, you say, I want $1 million. Then you both laugh and then you're like, okay, let's come down to earth. Right. But it's a great icebreaker. And I think I think like when you do interviews, and I've done plenty of interviews here, and I think like once you get past that, like that first icebreaker, no matter what, like you have to do it. And then everything just calms down. Like everybody's trying to sell themselves, but they got to understand you're just having a conversation. And, you know, I think people don't get that, but that's, you know, so that asking for $1 million, I'm still waiting for my $1 million.
When you get it, let me know. So, you know.
I mean, we all know that you don't join the military for the salary.
Yeah, right.
You know, and it's I mean, maybe some people do.
It's the world travel.
Right.
Yeah, it's the world travel.
Yeah, right.
It's the
Five-star hotels.
yeah, exactly.
In my case, yeah.
You've done punch that card.
I've seen.
Get a free coffee.
Yeah.
But yeah, I honestly don't think people know their full worth until they've sorted out. They've talked to a recruiter, they've talked to a hiring manager. Yeah. You know, because a lot of times we're the ones who price them out.
Right.
We're like, this is the salary we're looking for. And if they're coming in way below, then you're like, hey, surprise. You know, I mean, in some cases, I mean, that all comes down to margins and everything else. But still, you know, you're looking at
also honest recruiting.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a everyday situation.
Yeah.
Is you want to pay somebody what they're worth because you also want them to be a valued member of your team.
Absolutely.
And if they realize that they're worth so much more than what you've given them, then that is, from a retention standpoint, that's a huge risk that you're going to push out there. So from a hiring manager standpoint, if they're asking below, I mean, I'd look for a reason to pay you what you're worth, right? Yeah. Because that's somebody that I want to keep forever on my team, because I want to, they show leadership potential, right? They show growth. That's going to make us better.
Yeah.
I can't wait to win a championship with that person, but pay them, make sure they know what they're worth. Yeah. Because they're also going to bring more people with them that are that valuable.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The whole topic of pay equity and pay transparency is like super big right now in recruiting. Just with pay transparency being not just a California and you know, New York thing. It's growing. It'll be national within 5 years. Pay transparency laws, but pay equity too is like, you know, you as a military member, you might want to cut yourself low to get in the door, right. You know, but a good culture that you're going to want to be a part of is going to see that and be like, oh, you're asking 75, but you're worth 85. You're worth 95. So we're going to pay you this. I know you're asking for that, right. But we're going to pay. And that's what I appreciate MetroStar is like, it doesn't matter what the person asks for. Right. We look at what are your qualifications, you know, where are you in your career against this requisition that, you know, is in this pay range, and we're going to pay you what you're worth, right. You know, but a military member doesn't know that. I remember when I was transitioning out, I didn't have to go look for a job because I started my own business, but there was a sentiment of, you are now competing, no offense, you're now competing with college graduates.
That's right.
You're a college graduate level. And I'm like, wait, what? But I'm 31. Right. I've deployed 3 times. Right. I can fix multi-billion-dollar aircraft. Yeah. But wait, you know, so it's, but there is that sentiment of wanting to cut yourself low.
I want to talk about skills and adaptability. Andy, you just touched on, you know, company culture, right? So how did each of you approach finding the right fit in terms of company culture and your values during your job search?
So for
paycheck.
Paycheck. Sorry. Yeah. They pay you what you're worth. Glassdoor, like leading indicators. There's at the senior level, you want to do a little more in-depth research because if you know what to look for as far as growth numbers and things like that. But as far as culture, to be able to support a growing company, you do have to have things like retention. You do have to have specific services that are within that organization. Even the benefits, right, are a leading indicator of that culture and what they support, like our leave policy, right? That's a pretty big indicator of culture. So before you get into the interview, it's really hard to find leading indicators of what that company culture really is. But I would say, doing some a little deeper Google searching on, you know, the projects that the company sponsors. What are some things that they participate in? Are they a right technical, strategic, mental, everything fit for that on paper, and then researching. But yeah, a lot of time you just look at the salary, look at does it fit, and then go from there. So that's where I start.
Yeah, so that was the one thing I did not put a lot of emphasis on was the salary piece. Because you can pay me $200K and the culture sucks, the job sucks, I'm unhappy, and that was one of those things that, after 20 plus years in which we were, 15 plus years, we were in and out of wars, that I didn't want that type of, to be a part of that type of environment anymore. I wanted to be somewhere where I can freely, innovate. Be a part of something like, teaming with Joe and folks like that, where it's not just your typical 9 to 5 in a square box. You check, you punch your ticket, and then you go home, and then you're thinking about the next day because you got to go through it all over again. I want it to be free. I want to be free floating and find a space where I can bring true value without losing myself in the process of the job.
Right.
The day inner workings of the job, being a part of a family type environment. And that's what I was searching for.
Did any of you ask in the screen with the recruiter or interview, tell me about your culture? Was that a question that you maybe led with at the end of the interview?
Innovation Lab is different. Yeah. It's just
I would say I didn't even know to ask that question.
I didn't either.
That wasn't even something that was like top of my mind. I mean, I think like my two things were like flexibility, because I had kids who I needed to get to soccer or to field hockey or whatever.
Right.
I had a kid going to college. So my big thing was like, I need to have flexibility. I need to be able to independently work as well as working, in collaboration. But I need to be able to, like, if I can't start work at 10 because I got to deal if I got to help my wife or help my kids or something, can I keep working until 6 o'clock in the afternoon? Or do you have core work hours that if I'm not there, then you'd be like, hey, you missed 2 hours of the core work hours, you're gone. I think my biggest thing was flexibility, but I didn't even think that's not a question.
But did you ask about flexibility?
I did.
Okay.
I did.
You asked about the culture.
I did, but I didn't specifically come out and say, hey, tell me about MetroStar culture.
Right. Like our culture here at MetroStar is a great culture in general, but it may not fit what is important to you. Right. And so to your point, I never asked the question like, how's the culture at MetroStar? Right. But you asked about flexibility because your culture and I'm going to stop saying culture. What is important to you?
People in culture, huh?
What is important to you was flexibility. I need to be a dad first. I need to, be able to have this flexibility in my life, amongst other things, I'm sure. And you asked about that. And I think people need to understand, especially veterans, need to figure out before they go into interview with any company, like understanding their culture is always going to be a roll of the dice. Like you're going to join a company and be like, oh, I hope it is what they say it is. But if you're asking what's important to you and how does MetroStar, how does ABC company, maybe not ABC company, but how does it? I'm in Virginia. I forgot about that. But how does your culture line up with what's important to me? And that's how you figure out if the culture is going to fit.
Well, and that's what I thought was so forthcoming about MetroStar too. Because when I brought that up, they're like, "Oh yeah." I mean, I think there was just a comfortability, whatever.
You should
feel comfortable.
help them out.
Help me out here.
You want some crayons?
Yeah, but I think for me, I didn't, have a question directly tied to how this is the culture. I think my interaction with Ali told me all that I needed to know. If a guy leading a company feels this way about, the people that he's bringing in, and he's so open and honest with everything from our interactions and stuff like that, it starts with him. I'm like, man, I'll jump through walls for you, man. If this is genuine, I would jump through walls for you. And you come in, and sure enough, man, I was like, Ali, I live down in Fredericksburg. Do you want me here every day? It's like, Jermaine, and he put out a calculator. He pulls out the calculators and does the math of how many hours I was spending on traffic, versus not being, on a keyboard being productive, right?
Right.
So like, Jermaine, if you do that, man, you're going to spend about 40% of your time, 50% of your time on the road.
Yeah. Thank you all for being here. I have one last question for you. A bit loaded, but you can answer it however you'd like. Looking, buckle in, gentlemen. Looking back, what would you have done differently during your transition, if anything? Jermaine, I'm going to start with you this time.
Yeah, I'll be simple with this one. The main thing that I would do differently is just take time off. Don't be in such a rush to jump into the market, because we are programmed as military members transitioning to be in a job. We're programmed. We've been doing it a long time. And so we naturally says, well, I just left a job. I need to find a new job. But if you have the time to take time off, to get to know that civilian side of yourself, because you haven't been associated with that person in a long time. A lot of people say, well, when I take the uniform off, I'm kind of like a civilian. No, you're not, because you're still dialed into the mission set. So, that's what I will tell anyone transitioning. Don't be in such a rush to jump right into a job after you transition military, because there is some time mentally that you need to make that transition. Yeah.
I suck at taking time off. I'm just constantly on. I'm an on person. Yeah. And I would say, balance your self-worth with your, motivation sets. So yes, you are going to eat some humble pie as you go through the process, but also the things like certificates or degrees are things that you can build up before you get out as you're in the transition phase, to take advantage of the dollars that the military spent on you as well. So you can go get those certificates for free. You can go get some of those courses for free. You can go get those things while you're still active duty. And that will actually help mitigate some of that struggle, some of that turbulence that you're going to experience, or guaranteed to experience it, because of work that you might not have understood needed to be done before you got out. So while you are, resting and hanging out, is you can spend a couple hours a day or an hour or two a day just taking these certificate courses or these professional certifications. And now you've got these resume builders that people are looking for. So absolutely, humble pie is something that you are going to have to eat, but there are ways in which you can mitigate that, that process. So that's what I'd say.
Fair point. Johnny, what would you have done differently during your transition, if anything?
Well, I'm going to first agree, time off. You mentioned that earlier, and I wanted to say it before. I went, like I said, I think I started, as soon as I got home, I started my job, basically. So definitely wish I'd taken some time. And then the other one that I also came up was, I wish I'd found a mentor before I got out. Somebody that I could, somebody in the industry that I could to talk to leading up to and then after. That's it.
Over to you, Mike.
I would say time off. I mean, my transition was not, it was pretty easy. I didn't really have, my biggest thing was, I was studying to take my PMP, which I failed the first time, took it again 2 weeks later. But I knew, at that point I'd already done 3 interviews here. First one being the day before my retirement ceremony, 3 weeks after I started transition, or after I did terminal leave. But having all that time off and basically my focus was, was earning a certificate. And, because I think any of us leaving, we want that time where we can double dip for a little bit, get 2 salaries, just kind of pad your bank account a little bit, especially if you end up starting your own business. But yeah, it was nice having some time off and not having to get up and I think the hardest thing too is trying to figure out what you're supposed to wear every day. Because before you just throw on some camis and go to work, or a flight suit in your case or whatever. It's I had to go buy a new wardrobe.
Yeah.
So the things that, again, some that people don't think about.
Yeah, man,
Yeah.
that was funny because I went to the men's warehouse. Hey, I have been wearing one uniform, one outfit for a long time.
Yeah.
Help me
You
pick out some
guys changed
outfits, right?
cameras like 15 times.
They
over
probably
10
love
years.
that. Come on in. You've come to the right
No,
place. You know the
I
measurement.
agree. I think time off, and I agree with the mentor. I mean, I was very fortunate, and I think it was because of where I was transitioning from.
Right.
That I had these people who had made that transition from government or military to industry or to contracts, and while they're still supporting the military, they knew it was like some of those people did it only 3 or 4 months before I did. So it's I can't think of anything else just because I was lucky. Not everybody's lucky.
Right.
So.
Andy Gill, close us down.
I would be less prideful. And what I mean by that is, I've said it a couple of times. I started a high-end residential painting company in Charleston, South Carolina. The market was perfect. That's where I ended my active duty career. It's the business my dad owned growing up, so I kind of knew. And I did all the sales, marketing, and subcontracted everything out. A lot of work, ton of work. There's resources out there. Like, so if you're a veteran and you're transitioning and you're wanting to start your own business, there's veteran loans, there's grants, there's all kinds of options that you can do. My mindset was, well, I didn't need that. I don't need that. Like, I can do it myself. That's for people that don't have this skill set or can't grow their own business. And I can make it on my own. And yeah, I did 7 years successful business, but those resources are there. A lot of, veteran benefits. It's hard for a veteran to say the words, "We earned that."
Yeah.
And it is. It's even hard to say it now, but we did. We earned those VA benefits, whatever those VA benefits are, whether they're medical or they're business related or they're certificates that are free. We put the time in. We earned it. They're there for us. So I tried to do everything on my own, and I did it on my own. But I missed out on probably a lot of, equitable decisions that I could have made for my business. And that was my experience. But you could probably apply that to many other places, whatever you're transitioning into post-military career. Take advantage of the opportunities that are only for you, and don't feel bad about it, because that was my mindset. So.
Well, thank you again for joining us on this special episode of MetroStar's Civvies Podcast.
Hoorah.
Thank you.
Go Army. Be Navy.
Hey, Mike.
Doubt it.